King squeezes Andrew. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. I've explained previously that royalty has more than its fair share of narcissists. This is because, back in the mists of time, the individuals that managed to bring together a semblance of a nation who seized the land and ruled it often were narcissists. To be able to get into that position, an absence of emotional empathy, a drive to succeed, grandiosity, entitlement, being manipulative, etc., all of those were skills which aided in somebody getting put into that position. One of the most important aspects for royalty was, of course, the continuation of the dynasty, the creation of an heir. And that would mean that the child that was born of that narcissist king would potentially have the genetic predisposition towards narcissism. Furthermore, the environment in which that child was brought up would likely be one of a lack of control, increasing the likelihood that another narcissist would be waiting in the wings to inherit the country and the throne. And thus, with the interbreeding that went on between royal families, it's no surprise at all that throughout history, narcissist after narcissist has popped up in the royal lineages of various royal houses around the globe. And I pointed out to you previously those that have appeared within the British royal family, and we have an instance of a clash of two of them, albeit different types. Charlie Parker, great name, pick that out, Charlie Parker, writing for the Times, states, calls to cut the Duke of York off from the royal family grew after his disastrous BBC interview in 2019. See parts passive for the analysis of that utter train wreck, prompted outrage over his friendship with the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Prince Andrew stepped back from his royal duties and was stripped of his military titles and patronages. See parts passim for the explanation as to the impact that has upon him. But he managed to keep hold of his £1 million a year allowance, residual benefit, and continue living in the 30-room Royal Lodge. It exhibits his sense of entitlement that he should still be paid in that way with an allowance despite what he'd done. Now, 5 years later, the King has severed his brother's financial ties, a decision that may force the Duke to downsize from his home at Windsor Great Park to the more modest Frogmore Cottage. The King is believed to have instructed the Keeper of the Privy Purse, his finance director, to cease payments of the annual allowance, and he no longer funds his 7-figure private security detail. Thus, the King asserts control over Prince Andrew by removing a considerable residual benefit with regard to the annual allowance, and the security detail. The removal of those residual benefits is naturally a threat to the control of Prince Andrew. The revelation has appeared in an updated biography by the royal writer Robert Hardman, serialised by the Daily Mail. The Duke is no longer a financial burden on the King, a source said. Now, pausing there, why might a narcissist pay the money in the first place? Well, of course, if it suits the prime aims, that's what occurs. Accordingly, King Charles is extremely wealthy, and the amount that he was paying in the grand scheme of things is but a small part of his fortune. But it enables him to assert control over his brother through financial largesse, which is part of the grandiosity of the type of narcissist that he is. And he would not regard it as a burden because his narcissism would compel him to regard it as generosity. However, when Andrew becomes painted black and threatens the King's control, then he becomes regarded as a burden, and therefore the financial largesse shifts. Remember, when you're painted white, everything about you is viewed as wonderful. When you're painted black, those same things that were once wonderful are now awful. Thus, in the eyes of Charles, Andrew was a fair beneficiary of this support. It was enabled him to exhibit his financial largesse, do a good thing. Now, because of Andrew's behaviour and he's painted black, he's viewed as a burden. and therefore that is a threat to the control of the king, so he nullifies it by removing his financial largesse. Andrew has not received an income since stepping down as working royal because of his friendship with Epstein, who died in prison in 2019. However, after the death of Elizabeth II in September 2022, Charles funded security as well as a hefty living allowance for his brother. Andrew's refusal to move from the Royal Lodge has been a source of contention. Here, his intransigence is manifested from his narcissism because telling him that he has to move is a threat to control. Therefore, he won't do it. Sources close to the Duke have argued that he has a cast-iron long-term lease on the late Queen Mother's former home. However, he is ultimately responsible for its expensive upkeep. A friend of Charles previously told The Times, it can be done tidily or untidily. It can be done with grace and dignity, or it can be forced upon him. It's all rather sad, but as things stand, life at Royal Lodge is set to become increasingly cold and uncomfortable for the Duke. The only question now is when he will realise that he has become a prisoner of his own pride. In cutting off Andrew's allowance, the king has, according to Hardman, made good on his late mother's determination to solve the Andrew issue. The Duke had made it clear to the king's advisers that they have no right to force him to downsize, and he has firmly rejected suggestions that he move to Frogmore, which, although smaller, with 5 bedrooms, has the added benefit of being inside the Windsor Castle security ring of steel. The reduction in size is a loss of status, which is of importance to the somatic narcissist that is Andrew, and therefore is a threat to control in removing him from one property to a smaller one. Andrew will now have to find the money to maintain the property, with no visible sign of independent income. This, of course, has become increasingly difficult because most people have backed off from him as a consequence of the allegations that were made against him and his friendship with Epstein. This is said to include the cost of protecting several valuable works of art and pieces of furniture borrowed from the royal collection, the treasure trove of antiques held in trust by the monarch on behalf of the nation. Andrew has asserted that he can continue to pay for his own upkeep, claiming to have found other sources of income related to his contacts in international trade. If he can find the money, then that is up to him, but if not, he will find that the king does not have unlimited patience, another insider added. Family friends said that although the matter had been temporarily resolved, Andrew's obstinacy had soured family relationships. Accordingly, Charles is putting the squeeze on Andrew by removing this residual benefit, which of course threatens his need for control. He claims that he can find the money, but only time will tell. But yet again, we see the clash between these two individuals and how their relationship changes depending on how one has been viewed by the other. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.